Trainer. The David the Dog Trainer podcast.
Sponsored by Traeger Grills.
Episode number 3. Sponsored by Traeger Grills. I love a good Traeger grill. I don't have one, but I want one.
I wish.
This is an evening podcast. It's 8 p.m. right now. We were supposed to start a half an hour ago. We all kind of fucked up on that. That's okay.
Debatable.
We were here on time.
No, you weren't. You guys were the latest ones. I was the second latest, though. Josh was ready and waiting like 5 minutes before we were supposed to start, which is great.
Very impressive.
Well, since it's an evening podcast, we're having a couple beers right now. It's been a long day. It's been emotionally charged day. Today was boss review day. Christa, how was boss review day?
It was pretty good.
What were you expecting versus what it was?
Is this what the podcast is about? My
Surprise.
My boss performance.
Review day.
Christa's very first leadership performance.
Yeah. Wait, what did you want to know about it? It's private.
I said, how was it versus how you thought it was going to be?
Better than I thought it was going to be.
Good.
I had very, very low standards for it.
Wow.
Krista had low expectations of what people thought of her.
Yes.
Oh. I was like, you mean of yourself? Or?
Yeah, of myself, I
Both.
mean.
Do you feel like you had takeaways from it?
Yeah.
Good.
What would be the point if I didn't?
I don't know.
Oh my God. I don't think you're going to get what you're searching for.
Chris is
wants
like,
you
no,
to
I'm fine.
conversate."
Everyone's wrong.
Yeah, I don't know. I think they went really good.
Yeah, well, tell us about yours.
I will tell you about
All
mine.
right.
What would you like to know about mine?
What did you take away from yours?
So, I think there are a couple of big takeaways from mine. So, to give everybody context here, so this is the second year that we have officially done boss evaluations, which is essentially where we gave all of the staff pieces of paper where they got to rate us on different aspects of our leadership skills, anywhere from how we give information, how we give advice to people, how we listen to people, how we're heard, different things that we can do to make their jobs more impactful in different ways. And the first year that we did them last year, everybody did mine, and it was really weird at first. Emily and I were talking about this earlier a little bit. It's not that, you figure the context of these boss reviews is they're supposed to be anonymous, right? So everybody does them. You don't know who makes any of them. So you're getting essentially the most raw version of what people think of you as a leader, as a boss, as a human being, essentially, right? And the first time that you get those done, if you're not going into it with the right mindset, it could be really upsetting initially because, frankly, the whole point of them is to figure out what you're sucking at, right? There's no part of that review that's like, hey, here's all the things you're awesome about, right? Here's all the things that you're really good with and stuff like that. So 90% of the information on it is going to be either very neutral, you're pretty okay at this, or it's going to be, this is exactly why you're doing it incorrectly, right? And especially given the anonymous format of how we're doing them, it's going to force types of conversation or types of ways that it's kind of put out to you in a way where you would never get that in kind of a sort of face-to-face kind of situation. So, I kind of let you know ahead of time, even though yours were really good, that, you kind of have to take everything with a degree of a grain of salt, right? Because it's not that any of that stuff is personal. It's not that because you're rushing through your day and you don't hear people out, or, you present criticism to people in a way where it's just too blunt or whatever it may be. It's not like those people think that you're a bad person over it. It's just a black and white fact of this is something that you need to improve on, right? So I remember the first year that we did them, I was reading through them and I don't know what I was expecting, but I don't know if it was the ego side of me that was just like, everything's fine, everything's okay, nobody has any critiques about anything, everything is perfect. But I was not expecting some of the criticism that I got in them. And it really took me a couple of days to digest it. It really took me a couple of days to look at it, critically and be like, okay, cool. How much of this is, consistent from person to person where it's like, okay, cool. I remember last time one of my big ones was, not responding in a timely enough fashion to people with like text messages or calls when they needed me when I wasn't at the facility. So that was something that was consistent from person to person to person to person to person. So it's like, okay, cool. I can take that. I can put that to the side and be like, this is clearly a problem, right? This is clearly something that I need to address in the coming year here. Where you'll see other things where you could tell they're kind of from an individual basis, where it's not necessarily it's a problem overall, but it's a problem that you just need to understand how to communicate or convey things to that person in a more appropriate fashion, right? So this year, I think I went into it with a little bit better of a mindset. I think I was more prepared for what I was going to get out of it. And I would say that most of the big criticism that I got in them this time around was things that I already knew, right? I am the kind of person where I move very quickly through things, and I expect things a certain way, and I will hold people to a really high standard with those things while forgetting the emotional side of like human being, right? I need to look at like, this is a person. This is not something where there's like not going to be different interruptions in the day to day, and there's going to be other things that pop up, and I have to adjust that expectation of those things on that basis, right? So I expected that going into it. I expected, that a lot of times I look at people as if I were like, this sounds bad, but like training dogs, right? Like where 90% of the time when we're giving dogs information, it's what are you doing incorrect so you can learn from the thing that you're incorrect, where I don't give enough positive reinforcement to people, right? I go by the side of, okay, cool. Well, if I'm not saying anything, you're doing everything correctly, right? And if I'm saying something, it's because you're doing something wrong. But the problem with that, as we know with how we're training dogs, is that
you got to have something to motivate them.
You got to have something to motivate them, right? You got to have something to push them to keep moving forward. And on the contrary, if I'm always just giving information as far as when somebody's doing something incorrectly, then I'm creating an association of anytime I am talking to you, it's typically going to be a negative, right? Which does not spark for good conversation. So those two things I would say that I fully expected going into it. Those two things I would say that I'm aware of and actively working towards. And trying to figure out new ways to kind of adjust them. I would say that the one that probably, I don't know if it shocked me as much as it confused me a little bit in how to handle certain types of things is
dramatic effect.
sip break. I would say the one that is going to take the most troubleshooting moving forward is the envision that I have for the company is creating something that could be replicated easily, right? And what that looks like is creating something where I can be as hands-off from the process as possible and allow it to operate independently and allow the leadership and allow the people to be able to communicate and work independently with each other without needing much direction from me. And some of the criticism that I got from people, I don't even know if I would call it criticism as much as just feedback that I got from people, is because I've been actively moving towards that, I've been stepping back from a lot of different areas of the business that I used to be a lot more involved in, where those people were looking at those things as if they still wanted that guidance. They still wanted me to be a part of those things and stuff. So it's kind of figuring out how to effectively manage that kind of chain of command where things can get moved throughout it and kind of strategically managed so that I don't have to be bottlenecked like I feel like I used to be, So I don't know. I would say that they went pretty good overall, but that's the biggest takeaway that I had from them is trying to figure out how to work through that kind of stuff. So I don't know.
I feel like a lot of us came to work at Miracle because of your dog knowledge. You kind of marketed yourself as David the dog trainer. So keeping in mind that I think just making sure that everyone has the same sort of standards as far as how to work with dogs and how to implement that. I think that's probably really what we all would want the most. It's just your dog knowledge more so than you being there for the day to day, because Christa manages the day to day really well, and I think that we do work well as far as a unit, but it's just making sure that you're still there to be like, hey, this is my knowledge, because I think that's what people are there for.
What I got out of this was Christa needs treats to know she's doing good.
That's exactly what I wanted you to take away from this.
Treating everybody.
Well, because even the clients are like, did David work with my dog? There's something to
Sure. So Looking at that, though, how do you find, and this is the big ultimate overall question here, right? How do you find that balance of it still maintains kind of the integrity of when people say stuff like that, what they really mean, which is not, is David the one that is hands-on with the dogs? Because I don't think that they actually care about that if in the end of the day the dog is still getting the quality. Go ahead. Are you going to say something?
I don't think we get it that frequently because we do.
I would agree with that.
I think because you have, like, our social media really showcases all of the staff there, that I think that kind of builds trust in a lot of people with the other staff members too.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So I think the social media kind of helps with that aspect of people not feeling like it has to be David to
I
do
agree.
everything. But I agree that people do want David there for building their dog training knowledge, you know?
Yeah. No, and I totally agree. Like, my last sent home, they had a coworker recommend them, and they were like, yeah, the coworker had worked with David. And they're like, so did David work with my dog? And I was like, no, but like, he's kind of set the tone for like the foundation of training, and he's entrusted all of us to make sure that we like set the same standards.
You should be like, yeah, everyone's just a kennel tech except David.
Yeah, David does it all.
Well,
Let me caveat and say that this is not intended to be the David is
show?
the best David show conversation to start here. This is general conversations of, again, like looking at things like, you know, a whole part of this podcast, Josh, you and I talked about this in the first episode, is how do we find ways to talk about not only just the dog training aspect of things, but the building of the business, right?
Yeah.
Leadership aspect stuff. Like, you have a company, I have a company. Christa and Emily obviously work for Miracle, but they have I feel like dog training really does create this kind of entrepreneurial mindset where you look at things like you're so active and you take so much pride in the work that you're doing that, you know, it forces you to think as if you had your own business and those types of things. And Christa talked about last time, she had her own dog walking business and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
So, you know, it's like, I like discussing these kind of hypothetical questions here, or real questions here, of how do you find that balance of all of those types of things, right? How do you really create something like that and have it be where people feel like you're still kind of that direct person that could be reached for certain things and everything, while also actively trying to remove yourself from stuff so that everybody else can kind of cohabitate and figure it out on their own without feeling like they need to be able to reach out to those things and kind of freely think a little bit more. And I think a lot of that, frankly, has to do with allowing for more mistakes, allowing for more working through things, and not having it be like, okay, cool, I'm going to kind of do that, but really on the back end, you know, I'm going to go in and I'm going to try to micromanage things from time to time, or I'm going to go in and I'm going to look at things that I don't like and I'm going to try to fix those things, and I'm going to say that I'm kind of acting independently, but at the same time, if I really look at it, you know, like, I still am kind of pulling strings here and there and not really allowing that free, this place is operating independently, and they're allowed to make those adjustments, and they're allowed to make those mistakes, and they're allowed to do all of those different types of things how they want to do those without the ramifications of me managing them, right? Mm-hmm. And I think that's the cool thing about these different types of reviews is, as I look at them, like, I'm able to kind of go through them in my head over and over and try to find where, okay, cool, how can I take ownership of that situation and figure out, okay, I'm getting feedback from people on needing to listen more, and I'm getting feedback from people on, you know, being able to give criticism and positive reinforcement a little bit better to people, and also that side of the equation of wanting me to be more active, because I think where that's coming from probably is because I'm giving a lot of the criticism and not enough of the positive reinforcement, and I'm also disconnected. It seems like it's coming from a place of me not understanding what's actually going on within the company. So, that's where what I like to try to get out of these different kind of reviews and stuff, and that's what has kind of been going through my head the last couple of hours since I read them. So, I don't know.
I think that's a good way to dissect everything, though.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Cool.
So you've kind of taken a precedent of taking a couple steps back and giving them more of a leadership role in the company and such, and like taking the dog training as their own, pretty much.
I would say trying to. You know?
Yeah, and because I want to get back to your note, like, people say, "Oh, did David touch my dogs? Like, did he have a point into that?
There's no touching of dogs.
No touching of the dogs. But it's like when Miracle started, it was me and you for a year and a half, pretty much, when I was doing media with you. Mm-hmm. So it was David doing a YouTube video, 3 days a week, especially in the last year. That's all we were doing. It was just YouTube videos. It was basically just your face. And I think you're still getting the repercussions of that. They're like, oh, I saw David, and, David did this and did that. So I think what you guys are doing in the media platform now with getting everybody on social media and stuff, finally.
Christa's needed the biggest push to get on the video. Yeah,
it only took us 25 takes for the first thing, the first shot.
Shy.
You know what's crazy, though, is how much in front of the camera some people can change. Because Christa, I'll watch her in these fucking lessons where she's just like, I'm talking up a storm, and I know everything, and here's all the answers to all your problems. And I don't even need to think about it. And then it's like, hey, guys, how do I teach my dog to sit? Well, first you take the table and you paw nail it, and
I can't do anything under pressure.
Yeah, but I'm in puberty. I'm sorry. Mm-hmm. But I think you're doing a good job of transitioning that, and I think this coming year you're going to see a difference. Like, yeah, David's still kind of the face, but it won't always be that. It'll be like, oh, I came here because Emily.
Right now, Emily is the face of our Instagram.
Yeah.
Emily has taken that leadership initiative to social media videos.
But what I'm saying is, like, 6 months from now, they'll be like, oh, yeah, you trained blah, blah, blah's dog, and I saw you on there. So they're going to be like, did Emily train my dog?
I introduced myself the other day to someone, and they're like, oh, we know who you are.
We know. You're Emily the dog trainer.
And I was like, oh, thanks.
Did that feel really good?
It was kind of cool.
Yeah.
Well, because I want people to know, like it's like a personal experience, like they're trusting our dogs with their dogs with us, and I want them to know, yeah, there's my face, but here I am too. I'm gonna help you work through this.
But overall, it's gonna help everybody out because it makes everyone feel like they're getting equal training, whether it was David or Christa or you,
right?
And so I think that was a great initiative to actually get someone in there full time and getting everyone involved.
Yeah.
What? Way to single me out.
I will always have PTSD from trying to make you do a video, and then just have Emily do it.
It would take
it's called delegating.
3 hours.
I taught Christa that trick.
Thank you.
No.
Yes.
I think it's cool. I think part of the mission of with Miracle, again, like I remember when I first started Miracle and transitioned from Heights to Miracle, was I wanted to make sure, number one, I didn't bottleneck myself. That was the biggest mistake that I made in Heights Canine, was virtually anything from a training standpoint had to run through me, or it didn't operate. And I hated that. It created more stress than you could have imagined. It created this sense of everybody was so reliant on me in order to get anything done. And it hindered our growth because we kept growing, and we grew at a substantial percentage, right? I mean, we had 3 locations for a little bit, but it increased my workload 3 times as well. And that sucked. And I always told myself, I was like, before I ever expand the company again, I want to make sure the infrastructure at that location is set up in a way where it really can operate without me, right? Now, the second side of that equation, so that was kind of the business-minded goal of starting Miracle, was getting something that could really be replicated, right? The training standpoint and the other big mission was, how do we, you look at a lot of these companies like Sit Means Sit, for example, right? And they're a huge franchise at this point, and they've taken that to a fault of, we expand at a level where, we could replicate this really easily, and we could pump dogs out, we can get all this stuff done and all that. But because of that, it lost a lot of the quality control aspect of it, right? So in trying to create something that's sustainable, I've been so scared to relinquish a lot of the quality control side of things, because I want to make sure we have this team of people that are just so ungodly competent in dog training that no matter what comes in, we know that we're always going to do our best work possible, right? And I think we've gotten so fucking close to that. Like you guys and Bridget and Seamus moving in that direction, and all of our other people that we've had train for us have really hit a point, I think, where they care so much about where the dogs are at and care so much about the company that when we, going back to the review side of things, that when we go to do these kinds of things, they care enough to give this kind of feedback of, we want to see this company continue to grow, right? We want to see this company continue to hit a point where we're able to do this work better and better and better and better. And you know, I'm the first to admit, I got into owning a business solely because I like training dogs, not because I wanted to own a fucking business, right? And now that we're here, it's like, okay, cool. I need to now bring my business and leadership and all of that kind of knowledge and everything up to my dog training knowledge standard in order to continue growing that in the right direction. So it's an ever-growing process. Wrapping things up on that conversation, you know, it's interesting. I like doing these, and it brings some interesting conversations, and I'm very excited for the future. So, good
Now,
stuff.
Christa, back to you. So your reviews.
Yeah, so your review went.
What, do I need a 20-minute monologue about my reviews now?
Yes. Please.
No, you don't have to do that.
Thanks.
All right, guys. Long conversation over. So last week, what we did is we reviewed the book. Wow, we are 22 minutes in right now. That's pretty wild.
That's pretty close.
People are gonna start listening to this and be like, "Oh my god, is this just the David Emotion show?" Good fucking god. This is what happens after when it's fucking 8:30 and you get a couple beers in me. So, anyways, so last week what we did was we reviewed Cesar's Way, first dog training book I ever read. We read through like the first half of the book. Maybe third of the book, a little over third of the book. And we decided to do a part 2 on it. I think it was really fun. I think the book has some really interesting points in it. We were able to kind of dissect a little bit and talk about. So we're going to get back into this book in a minute here. I have a couple more kind of sections that are notated off. So we kind of ended the book where he got into kind of explaining a little bit about his system, a little bit about how he got into dog training or dog behavior and stuff. This next section is going to get a little bit more into kind of tactical information, and he talks a little bit about his experiences once he's become a dog trainer and working with some of his clients and stuff. What did you guys like about last week doing this? What did you like about the book? Did you guys learn anything?
I mean, I knew it all.
I'm learning about Cesar and his wonderful upbringing into dog training. How about you?
Oh, I don't
Krista,
have an
did you learn
answer.
anything?
Not really, no.
All right.
I felt like it
I'm
brought
on
up
the
some
same
like
page as Emily.
I felt like it brought up some
She's
like
gonna have
decent
to go back and review.
conversations even after like on the way home. Like we discussed affection and whatnot and like kind
Yeah.
of what that looks like.
Yeah,
So.
actually we did. Yeah.
See, you did learn something.
Actually, we did.
See, she's on camera again. So
forgot. I forgot all of last week.
What was last week? All right, so we're going to get back into the book here. So, conveniently, we left off on page 99. So we're about to move into page 100. Wow. Very exciting. All right, so we're getting back into this. This next section is entitled The Myth of the Problem Breed. All right, so getting into this. When I go to see a first-time client, I sometimes don't know what the problem is that I'll be dealing with. I often don't even know the dog's breed. I like to come in cold and trust my instincts and observations because what the owner tells me is often very far from the source of the real problem. First fucking paragraph hits it right on the head. This is why we don't do assessments, right? I mean, we literally won't do assessments with dogs. People call, they're like, they want to get their dog in. They want us to meet the dog, this, that. They give us all this information about the dog. 90% of my assessments, I feel like, are like 15 to 20 minutes long. And they're all just the owner talking about what is going on with that dog, you know, trying to, like we talked about last time, humanize the situation and put all these emotions on it. And it's so far from the truth. We are not going to learn anything that we need to learn about the dog until two things. One, we actually start training the dog and we see how the dog responds to different things. And that's where we can figure out, one, is this a fear issue, insecurity issue? Is the dog just really hyped up? Is it a really dominant dog? Are they pushy? This, that. And then two, when we go to see the owner start working with the dog and we go to see how are they conveying information to the dog and in what ways are they doing that where it's creating problems, creating more issues, and they're giving mixed signals. So back to the book. The first thing I'll do is sit down with the owner and listen to his side of the story. Did you have something else to add to that?
Emily did.
Oh, go for it.
Why do you think that companies do assessments?
Because
It's a gimmick.
It's a gimmick. Man, you got it. It is such a gimmick. Everybody wants to do it. That's why. It makes them feel good. You know, look at, okay. So not to throw Sammy and Sid under the bus again, but they used to do those training evaluations all the time.
Do they still? I'm pretty sure.
I don't think they do anymore.
Oh, they
Interesting.
stopped it?
I could be mistaken, but I don't think they do anymore. But I know they did it. I think Lorenzo's did it for a little bit. And basically,
Tom's did it too. I mean, every place does it.
because look at this. How many times do you do a first lesson, right, where you put a prong collar on the dog, you start working the dog, and it's like magic in the owner's eyes, right? It's like, oh my gosh, my dog's like
But
kind
everybody
of healing
thinks
with
their
you.
dog's the worst dog, or it's such a unique situation that you have to meet the dog to know if you can work with it.
Yes.
So,
Yeah, and it's just not.
Isn't that like so not like ineffective as far as cost goes though?
The assessment, are you talking?
Yeah, because you're wasting a lot of time, right, for paying your employees to just sit there. Because at my
but I
last
think-
job, like assessment after assessment, like days, like
you guys did that many assessments?
at least 5 a day.
Oh,
Yeah,
wow.
but look at, I mean, the margins on a lot of what these companies are like paying their trainers and stuff and making off of the program. They eat it into the cost of the program.
Sure.
You figure an assessment, like how much is that, right? Like how much are you actually paying an employee to do that versus what you'll make off of a sale on that?
Wait, did
Yeah.
Sit charge for them, or they were free?
I think they were free.
Oh,
Yeah,
Tom's
they were free,
too.
but they also like they did a lot of like shows, and they would go to like home and garden shows, and so essentially like they would solicit people to want to do assessments. So that's kind of how they brought them in the door, I suppose. So I guess it does make sense as far as a business model goes.
Pretty much everybody comes into or calls at the facility knowing that they want to do training, though.
Yeah.
Hardly anybody asks for assessments.
I think a
feel
lot of that has to do with the marketing that we do. They
Yeah.
know what they're getting going into it, right? An assessment also for a lot of owners is not just, let me see what you can do with my dog. It's let me meet you and let me see if you're somebody that I can mesh with and want to work with, you know?
Yeah.
Where, listen, I mean, we could get that all accomplished over the phone, you know? Like whether I spend 30 minutes with you in an in-person assessment and block that time out, or I spend 25 minutes with you on the phone, the time factor of it is not that much different, right?
But honestly, like, our social media does gain a lot of trust from people.
I was
because-
just going to say
Yeah.
that, yeah.
Yeah. Because if you look at other dog trainers' social media, it's just pictures of dogs.
We were just talking about that
Yeah,
today.
Paige, Emily, and I were talking
Really?
about that
Yeah.
just a couple hours ago.
Yeah.
It is interesting to see like not that many people are conveying a message at all.
Yeah.
You know, through what they're putting out there.
Yeah. I know. It's insane that not a lot of dog trainers post them actually training a dog.
I don't know. I think a lot. It is a little intimidating initially. I mean, again, as much as I'll talk about the things I don't like about certain trainers. I mean, like Sean O'Shea with a good dog. He was one of the first guys that I saw out there that was posting video after video after video every single day of him.
60-second clips.
Yeah, like 60-second dog training tip, or like here's a video of a dog doing place command, or here's this, or here's that. And, you know, though the videos themselves weren't necessarily the most impressive, it was just the content put out repeatedly, where he was giving the same message, he was explaining what they do, and it gained a ton of trust from his clients as well. And that's why they made a name for themselves very quickly as like the aggression guys, because that's what they were marketing and putting out there. So the more you put that out there, the more trust you'll build organically from people, right? Yep. You don't have to do if you go to buy a $200 pair of Nike shoes or whatever, right? You're not going to call and be like, can I do a 45-minute consultation with you guys first before I buy these? No, because you trust the company and trust that they're going to put out good work, right? And you know that the product that you're going to get is quality. So, you know, assessments, not necessary from the training standpoint, gimmicky a little bit, but they're intended to build trust between client and dog trainer, and from a business hack there, that's why we do the social media. That's why we do the marketing and the media, so that we don't have to have that additional expense of doing that timed assessment.
Well, sorry to keep,
No,
but
you're
essentially,
okay. One paragraph in, guys, it's going to be a long one.
essentially exposing your entire program, I think, creates a lot of trust where, like, you almost have to do an assessment because you're not showing people what you do, right? Like, I tell people on the phone, like, our program is on YouTube, and you can use that if you'd like to. And I think even someone who has trained their dog on their own, they're going to tell 5 other people.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I don't know. It's just there's not that much to it, All right. The first thing I'll do is sit down with the owner and listen to his side of the story. I can't count the number of times someone who has read too many books on dog breeds will say, well, because she's a Dalmatian, she's naturally nervous. Or he's part Border Collie, part Pit Bull, and it's the Pit Bull that's the problem. Or Dachshunds are always a problem breed. Now, breeds is true to an extent. There are breed-specific traits that we'll see. German Shepherds, very reactive, very territorial, very guarding of things. Pit Bulls, naturally a little bit inclined to get into fights with other dogs. People are going to hate me for that one. Rotties, one of the most headstrong, dominant breeds out there. So, again, it's true to an extent. You got to keep all these things in mind, but he is right. A lot of people will look too much into these problems. So, I have to explain to these clients that they're making a fundamental mistake by blaming the breed of the dog for its behavior problems. It's the same thing when people make generalizations about human races and ethnicities, that all Latinos are crazy, that all Irish are drunkards, and that all Italians are mobsters. When it comes to trying to understand and correct a dog's conduct, breed always comes third in importance after animal and dog. In my opinion, there's no such thing as a problem breed. However, there is no shortage of problem owners. Breed is something humans created. Geneticists and biologists believe that the first humans to live with dogs selected stray wolves with the smallest body size and teeth, perhaps because these animals would do less harm to us and be easier to control. Then hundreds, perhaps thousands of years ago, we began to mate dogs to create offspring that would excel at certain tasks. Bloodhounds were bred to have heightened scenting abilities. Pit bulls were bred for fighting dogs. Sheepdogs were bred not only to herd sheep, but also to look like them. So today, we have the German Shepherd, we have the Boxer, we have the Chihuahua, we have the Lhasa Apso. Are you familiar with that breed?
Yeah.
What is it?
It's like a long-haired, like Maltese kind of looking dog, right? Mm-hmm. Lhasa Apso.
Have you ever looked through one of those dog breed books and just seen how many
Dude, there's way too many
breeds that there are actually out there? It's pretty insane. We have Doberman. We have hundreds and hundreds of different breeds to choose from. When you're selecting a dog, breed is definitely important to keep in mind, and we'll go deeply into that later, but it's vital to remember that every breed is still always an animal, dog first. All dogs share the same psychology. The breed is just the outfit that particular canine is wearing, and sometimes a set of special needs he or she might have. You're not going to be able to understand or control your dog's behavior by considering him or her simply as a victim of a breed. All dogs share the same innate abilities, but certain breeds have been selected to accentuate certain characteristics. We have a tendency to misinterpret those conditioned skills as the dog's personality. One conditioned skill is tracking ability. Because of their breeding, bloodhounds are naturally going to be better at it. They are going to be able to maintain themselves on the ground for longer periods of time. They don't care if they take a break to eat or not, as long as they find that scent. Can all dogs track? Can all dogs find things with their nose? Absolutely. They all recognize the world through smells, and all of them use their nose the way that they use our eyes. But some of them are going to better than others at sniffing out a target. This isn't to say that breed doesn't affect how sensitive a dog is to certain conditions and environments. In fact, the special needs a particular dog might have based on her breed is one of the most important things a new dog owner should be aware of when selecting a breed of dog for a companion. For example, in nature, all dogs travel, but Siberian Huskies were bred to travel for longer periods of time. The Siberian Husky as a breed can travel for days on end. It's their natural job. This innate ability, however, makes it harder for a Siberian Husky to live in the city because its genes are telling it to range over long distances and take long hikes to work off its excess energy. Without sufficient exercise, it will get frustrated more easily than, say, a Dachshund. But when a Siberian Husky is frustrated, it will develop the same symptoms and side effects as a Dachshund that's frustrated, or a Pit Bull that's frustrated, or a Greyhound that's frustrated. Nervousness, fear, aggression, tension, territorial behavior, all these issues and illnesses result when the dog and the animal in her is frustrated. It doesn't matter what breed she is. That's why it's a mistake to obsess about the breed when you're dealing with a problem behavior. You gonna say something?
Yeah, I have a lot to say. I don't know how much I agree with that.
Let's hear it. That's why we're discussing it. What do we like? What do we not like?
I mean, I agree to like an extent, but I feel like almost with my clients, they don't recognize the breed that they have in front of them nearly as much as like they should. You know, a lot of people have German Shepherds with huge reactivity issues, and people don't understand that that's largely just the way, not just the way, but kind of like Shepherds are more prone to that, or cattle dogs, or Aussies, like they tend to be more timid in general, and like people shy. But I think people don't consider that when they have that breed as much.
Josh, do you think that about Bender?
Yeah, I guess. I mean, I knew going into it, I did the research.
Right.
You know,
Yeah.
I knew exactly what we were getting into when we got him. But I think you're correct that a lot of people just get dogs and they're
Yeah.
like, whatever, you know,
Yeah.
even
They think
whether
they
it's
look cool. Yeah.
yeah, or if it's a rescue, it's like, oh, it's just a mutt. I don't know what's in it. Like, and then they bring him in and we're like, oh, that's the reason why it's
Yeah.
crazy. It's obviously this or this.
Yeah, I would agree with you, Krista. I don't necessarily agree with that, and I think that that's the reason why I picked this section of the book, is to start talking about some of the disagreements as well, because these are common things that will be shared with owners, right? Is that the dog doesn't necessarily matter. Now, here's where we contradict ourselves a little bit, though, because how many times do you get asked in a lesson, what's the easiest breed to train? Or what's the hardest breed to train?
Yeah.
You get that asked a lot. And what do you typically tell them?
I don't have an answer. It depends on, it's dog to dog. It's not specifically a breed, because like you could say German Shepherds for the majority are like very food motivated and eager to learn, but then you also get like the drastic opposite of very timid, like shut down, nervous Shepherds, or same with Pitties. I feel like those are the two most common breeds we get are Pitties and German Shepherds.
For sure.
And like same with Pitties, like they vary. There's like a huge range of Pitties. You got the super pumped ones, and then you get the really, really anxious, timid ones.
Because they're so crossbred, I think. But that's to the point, is that I would say, so looking at this, right? So the part of it that I would say that I agree with is not necessarily what he's saying as far as, where does it say here? Dog for, what is it? Dog, animal, dog, breed, I think. Where is it at? Where did I miss it?
Like not getting hung up on the breed, but
Yes.
kind of understanding what breed you have in front of you.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Nobody really does their research.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's why German Shepherds are like the number one dogs.
Animal, dog, breed, right? So it's an animal first, so you have to understand that. It is a dog second, right? Which is going to be temperament related, I think, right? So what kind of dog is it? Is it a nervous dog? And I don't know if that's what he means by this. I'm kind of analyzing this a little bit. But temperament is what I always say, right? When people ask me that question is, you know, what's the easiest dog to train or what's the most difficult dog to train? I always say, well, it depends on the temperament. So temperament being second most important, and then breed being third most important. And then I think breed is where you get into the conversation about, okay, cool. So temperament is second most important. Breed will lean towards one temperament or another, right? Just like we were talking about, Rottweilers tend to have a temperament of being a little bit more stubborn. German Shepherds tend to have a temperament of being a little bit more kind of fiery and reactive and stuff like that. So those things are going to make it easier or harder to train. So interesting.
Josh, I kind of disagree with what you said, though, as far as people not doing their research. I just don't think that that's a fair generalization necessarily. I think people do their research and don't picture it in their lives.
Yeah.
You know, I know you and I have had conversations about like Doof a little bit, and personally with like Hans, my Doberman, he was at the shelter that I worked at for a month and a half before I decided like this is absolutely my dog, right? And I did my research, but I didn't. So like one of the biggest things is that they're really prone to having prey drives. So I didn't think about that as far as my cats, and which is stupid, obviously. Like
I think it's just like the cons. People don't see the cons in the breed. I think people, I don't know. I feel like people pick breed dependent first on like look,
Yeah.
which is why I got Doof.
Yeah, same with Hans.
Look, and then everything else.
Mm-hmm.
Oops, sorry.
Yeah, but I think you're also looking at it through your eyes, where you have been working with dogs for a long time, and I know quite a few people that have just got a dog,
Yeah.
and
You're
they,
not
they
wrong.
didn't think about it.
Yeah.
They were, especially like, the people that it's a good thing to get a dog from a rescue. I applaud it, but those people just go in blind. Usually, they're just like, that one looks cute.
Sure.
Yeah. I actually just had a client yesterday who just went to the shelter and then went home with a dog for no reason.
Yeah, I'm not. Yeah, I'm not. I guess it was too much of a generalization, but I think for the most part, the people that have the problems are the ones usually that maybe didn't really look into what they were getting into.
Yeah, I would agree. I think it's probably like a 50-50 thing, right? Like some people are like so prepared for their
Yeah.
dog, and then
There's the people that spend hours looking for the right breeder or whatever, flies to California, to get a dog.
That's my hometown, so it wasn't that weird.
Yeah, I guess that's true. But then there's the impulse. People that she just talked about, where it's like, oh, I got a dog.
I'm gonna pop into the shelter.
I
real
did that with
quick.
B. I saw B, thought she was cute, and I was like, she's mine now.
Did you do that with Vera?
So I didn't know anything about dogs when I got Vera. I actually I wouldn't even call him a friend. He's just some guy I knew through somebody else. And he had a pit bull. His name was Levi. And it was like the cutest, sweetest thing ever. It was just this little gray, like pocket pitty thing. And I was like, that's what hooked me on pit bulls. I was like, man, that thing is awesome. I want to get one just like that, right? And I remember the couple times I saw Levi, he seemed so well behaved. He would come into, places wherever we were at, and he would just like sit down next to him all calm and stuff. Now, later looking at this, I realized Levi was an anxious mess of a dog, and that's why he just like laid next to his feet the whole time. But anyways, I remember asking him, I was just like, hey, like I wanted to get a dog. I went on Cuyahoga County Animal Shelter's website, and Vera was like the poster dog on the front of the screen. She was just a little puppy, right? And had the cutest little picture. And I went to go see her, and I asked him to go with me to go check her out. And he was just like, yeah, it seems like a good one.
And then
I was just like, all right, well, here we are. I got a dog. So, yeah, I would say I went solely off of looks. I remember walking through the shelter, and I remember I saw her, and I walked through the entire shelter, and I was just like, none of these other dogs look cool. Like, this one looks sweet.
That's funny.
Yeah.
It's funny now, like as a dog trainer, you like look back and saw that your friend's dog was just anxious. But that's what like pet parents, I think, see or don't see.
Yeah, they just see that the dog is well behaved. Back to the book. Once again, we come back to energy as the source of behavior. All animals as individuals are born with a certain level of energy. There are 4 levels of energy regardless of the breed: low, medium, high, and very high.
Nothing in between any of those.
There's 4 degrees of energy level.
Yeah.
Very scientific here.
Thanks, Susan.
Low, medium, high.
I think dogs could totally range though.
Yeah.
You're not.
I don't know. It seems like you can't really argue with low,
Vinny's
medium, high, and very high.
Vinny's always very high.
Very high. That is true for all species, including humans. I would say. Where do I fit on that? Where does Josh fit on that spectrum? Anyways, think the people you know, regardless of race, regardless of age or income. Don't you know people who are naturally very low energy, who are couch potatoes? What about the people who never seem to stop running around 24/7? Or people who go to the gym for 2 hours a day, 7 days a week? I have 2 wonderful sons. My eldest, Andre, is medium energy, like my wife. Always thoughtful, but when working on a task, focused like a laser beam.
Did he just call his wife out? Like,
She's medium energy.
just medium energy, honey. Kitchen's not going to clean itself,
I love how he's also like, let me see the energy level of my sons. They have
Yeah.
4 quadrants of energy as well. My youngest son, Calvin, on the other hand, is more like me. Very high energy. He's just naturally a ball of fire. Sometimes nothing can slow him down. No energy level is better or worse than the other. But when choosing a dog, it's a good idea to try to match your energy level with hers and vice versa. I tell my clients that they should never knowingly choose a dog with an energy level higher than their own. If you are a laid-back kind of person, I wouldn't recommend picking the one dog at the shelter that's jumping around madly in its cage. Choosing an energy level that's compatible between dog and owner is, in my estimation, far more important than choosing a breed, especially if you are looking at a mixed breed dog or rescuing a dog from a shelter. A lot of interesting things. So this is the section of the book where you start getting into how much do we agree with what he's saying, how much do we not agree with what he's saying.
I mean, you can't go into a shelter and say don't pick that one because of how it's acting. It's in such a dramatic environment.
I also think that there are literally, what did we just talk about with Levi? Levi seemed like he was so low energy. He was calm, collected, cool.
Oh, he was just like,
right? He's an anxious mess, right? So the problem is certain behavioral issues will show themselves as high energy or low energy as well, right? So how do you make that assessment of what the energy level is? I don't know.
not at the shelter.
What ways would you go in and select a dog?
From a shelter?
Sure.
I personally wouldn't go to a shelter. I personally prefer a reputable breeder, but if I did go to a shelter, I would prefer a dog that.
Well, let's back up for a second here, because you just said a very controversial thing. Why would you go to a breeder over a shelter for a dog?
Because I kind of want to know like the genes of the dog a little bit more and the temperament a little bit more instead of going personally. Like I feel like that's what I desire a little bit more.
This podcast is now canceled. Great, thanks.
We're canceled.
We're canceled now.
We're sponsored by Adopt Don't Shop.
Okay, so here's the thing. So what about the conversation? And here's the thing. So you know way more about breeders than I do, right?
Mm-hmm.
I personally have never gotten a dog directly from a breeder before. Vinny was from a breeder, but he was secondhand. Cade was from a breeder, but he was secondhand. And Vera and Deli were both adopted.
Yeah.
Right? So I never went through the process of selecting for one. But there is a whole conversation out there as far as purebred dogs being more susceptible to health-related issues, right?
Oh, I don't think that's true. I think that's...
Do you know what the argument is?
I don't, but I kind of feel like that was driven by the Adopt Don't Shop people a little bit more. I mean, look at all the shelter dogs that we get that have a ton of health issues that come into us.
Sure.
Yeah.
So I think... I mean, there are like purebreds that I think would have health issues, but I think reputable breeders try very hard to breed out any health issues, and they try to breed for temperament.
Behavioral issues as well. Yeah.
Yeah. So that's personally like why I would want to go to a reputable breeder whenever I choose a next dog again. So I know the kind of temperament of the dog. I feel like I'm a little bit more like picky though, in that I am better than you guys. I'm just kidding.
No, I know that it's like definitely a health thing, the genes, because some breeders don't, and they'll just keep breeding within their.
They'll have a health issue pop up and just keep breeding that dog.
Or I mean,
with the non-reputable breeders,
or they'll just keep breeding within their own lines that they have, and that's the thing is, it's just like people. If you have some ancestral things start to break down, and you have some weird things happen with their genes, and that's why a lot of people get weird. But reputable breeders, will bring in fresh,
fresh.
What I don't know, another dog to breed with their dogs and try to keep it more populated in the gene pool.
You should have a reputable breeder on this podcast next to really go into this.
I think there's a lot of interesting people that we could have on this podcast to discuss those types of things.
Yeah.
Because here's the thing. I don't know that much about breeding. That being said, as far as your controversial, comment about adopting versus breeding and stuff like that, I personally have no problem. I've never had a problem with people going to breeders because same deal. Like if there is a specific thing that you want, you want to know that you're getting the best quality version of that, right?
Yeah.
And that's not to say that there's not rescues out there where if you want a French bulldog, you can't find a French bulldog that's gonna have good temperament, right? That's $50 as opposed to $6,000.
I think adopt or go to a reputable breeder. I think the one thing we should all agree against is puppy mills. That's the only thing I would argue against.
Let's zoom out a little bit more on that here, right? So why are puppy mills bad? because of poor breeding. They're not doing the things that the reputable breeders would be doing, which is hand selecting out those bad traits they're seeing, right? Because the sole thing that they care about is what the dog looks like, right? Does it look like a husky? Because if it looks like a husky, we could sell it for the cost of a husky.
Does
right?
it look like a doodle?
Does it look like a doodle? Who even knows what the fuck a doodle looks like anymore? But if it looks like it, we could sell it for as much as you could sell a doodle for, right? I had a client in the other day. She works for an emergency vet somewhere way out west, like in the Elyria, Wellington area kind of situation. And she was telling me that she has worked with the owner of a major sports team's mascot. I'm not going to say what sports team. Whatever. Anyways, so they have seen litters come in that they had to do emergency C-sections on where the puppies have come out with no ears, 3 paws, missing toes, missing eyeballs, all sorts of fucked up stuff
like a
because of
science
how much
experiment.
inbreeding they're doing.
Wow.
Right? And that's the real sketchy part when you start getting into breeding and puppy mills and stuff is they start doing very, very close line breedings, right? Or just straight up inbreeding in those situations. And the more that you do that, the more chances you have of issues happening, but they're doing it because of one of two things, right? If they're a puppy mill kind of situation, they're doing it due to the fact that they can get more dogs out, and frankly, they don't care as long as they can get a couple that they can sell, right? Or if you're doing it from the standpoint of breeding for a very specific trait, I know in the working dog community, this is one of the most controversial parts of it, is they experiment with all of these different tight line breedings of like brother, half sister, mother and son, this and that, because even if 9 out of 10 of those dogs come out and need to get euthanized immediately, one of those dogs might be that like freak of nature that's just the most motivated, driven, psychopathic,
Was that Vinny?
bite-loving dog.
Wasn't Vinny?
Vinny was a brother, half sister breed.
Yeah.
Yes. So again,
Vinny
you know,
was the
like
one.
they're doing it for a specific reason, but that's where you start to cross the boundaries of like the ethical side of things. And I heard some stories from people in the working dog community of things that they're doing out in like Belgium and Germany and stuff with some of the Malinois out there, where I guess that there are certain combinations of breeding, like I don't know exactly which ones they are, but like a mother and son or a father and daughter or whatever, where if you breed those two together, there's like a 99.9% chance that it's going to be just a fucking shit show, right? But they'll still do it because, again, that like 1 out of 10 dog that they might get is going to be like exactly what they're looking for.
So they're just doing it, looking at it from the standpoint of what I need this dog to
stacking
win.
traits.
Yeah.
Stacking genetic traits to try to create the dog that can work nonstop or have the best bite strength or have, you know, the most high energy or the fastest, send-offs or whatever it may be. So it's
That's
crazy.
insane.
The breeding world is really wild.
I just had a client text me. They were getting like a Bernedoodle from a puppy mill, and it was like upwards of $6,000.
Yeah.
that
I
puppy.
don't know if you remember that little French bulldog I was working with, Bonnie, but they not rescued that dog. One of their friends bought that dog and couldn't handle it anymore, and they got the dog from them. And the owner of that dog spent like $6,500 on it.
That's insane.
Which is nuts. And this is where, again, you go to the conversation of adopt, don't shop, right? I kind of get the push that they're going for it. There's a lot of crazy shit going on in the breeding world, but there are also some very good breeders out there that really care a lot about the dogs that they're
It shouldn't be
putting
adopt,
out.
don't shop. It's reputable breeder or adopt. Like,
Yes, I agree.
there's
with
a
you.
lot of in between.
I mean, there's just been so much smearing.
Yeah.
It takes
catchy,
one, but it takes one bad breeder to go,
Yeah.
viral in the news, and then everyone's on the adopt, don't shop thing. I mean,
Yeah.
and it sucks because it's like anything else. You just need to look past the veil of just this one person that see
Yeah.
that there's people that actually care.
Well, it's just like aversive tools, but
Yeah.
that's a whole nother topic.
Very interesting. All right, back to the book. Moving on to the next section here. No room for weakness. I tried to pick the hardest sounding chapter titles. All right, guys. So, in nature, if a pack leader shows any weakness at all, he will be attacked and replaced by the strongest member of the pack. This is true across all animal species that live in tiered social systems. Only the strong can lead. In fact, extreme weakness among any member of the pack is not to be tolerated. If there is a dog in the pack that is unusually weak or timid, he will be assaulted by the others. Weakness doesn't cut it among any animal species except our own. This is one of the most interesting differences between modern human beings and the rest of the animal kingdom. Not only do we accept weakness in some of our pack members, we also actually rescue our weak brothers and sisters. We rehabilitate people in wheelchairs. We tend to our sick. We risk our lives to save a pack member who might not make it anyway. While what some researchers call altruistic behavior has been documented in many other species, especially the other higher primates. Compared with most other animals, human beings take this kind of graciousness to an extraordinary level. Not only do humans rescue our own, we save our animals too. We are the only species that rescues seagulls, crocodiles, hyenas, and whales. You'll never see a zebra rescuing an injured elephant. Think about the animal lovers you know. Dog lovers, lion lovers, horse lovers. Lion lovers, very common.
I'm a big lion lover.
Every animal
I'm a
seems to
Leo.
have its own fan club among humans. A group of people with such compassion for a chosen species that they'll rescue even the sorriest specimen of that species. Many of the dogs at my dog psychology center came to me in such bad shape that it was their last chance. I brought them back from the brink. I've got a dog with 3 legs, a dog with no ears, a dog with 1 eye, and a dog who's the product of severe inbreeding. Isn't that what we just talked about? Didn't I just see a bunch of this? He's always going to be mentally handicapped. It's because I'm a human and I feel sorry for these dogs that I'll do whatever it takes to give them another chance at a full, happy life. But in their natural habitat, other dogs don't feel sorry for the frail and the feeble. They attack and execute them. There's nothing intentionally cruel about it. Remember, we're also the only species with a system of morality, of right and wrong. It's simply that a weak animal endangers the rest of the pack, and nature has ingrained in animals the instinct to breed together the strongest members so the next generation will have a better chance of surviving to breed again. Nature polices its own. Thoughts? Everybody's got faces like they got them.
I recently saw a video of a dog save a goldfish. So
Did it save it by eating it and swallowing it?
no, it picked it up and put it back in the water.
Oh, I did see that.
So
That was really messed up.
also, aren't there a ton of videos of like chimpanzees saving like birds or something? There's like an elephant that was saving another drowning animal. So all in all, I think he's reading too much into wild wolves.
Possibly.
I think this is the biggest disagreements with Cesar. It's interesting. I think the first section of this book that we read, 90% of it we could agree with. Mm-hmm. I think a lot of what we got into in the middle section where he starts discussing some of this kind of stuff gets into people's biggest problems with Cesar, which is that a lot of these kind of wolf pack ideologies and stuff like that he's studied a lot and quotes a lot have kind of been proven to be incorrect to some degree. Now, let's try to find some similarities here, right? Do we find that dogs tend to go after unstable energy more often than not?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Right.
absolutely.
Especially when we get dogs that are in the same household that fight. It's usually one of them attacking the more like anxious, unstable one.
Yep. I did a assessment yesterday with 2 dogs getting into fights with each other, and the one was this Australian Shepherd mix. It was like 9 years old, and it was the sweet one, right? It was the one that they were like, we've had this dog for 8 years, 9 years, whatever. It's so sweet, loving, this, that. This dog was a hot mess the whole time. It was ping-ponging around the end of the leash, hyperventilate, whining.
Because the anxious dogs are sweethearts at home.
Of course they are.
You know?
Because they're so dependent on you. And because they're so dependent on you, they're going to be constantly looking for that affection from you, right? And it turns into problems. So I would say that finding the similarities in this, the problem with a lot of this stuff is how it's worded, I think, as far as it's worded from the standpoint of it's an always, right? Or it's a black and white, right? Like the weakness has to be attacked all the time. That's incorrect. I think that from the standpoint of the pack mentality he likes to talk about this in, a lot of times that weak energy will get singled out for sure, but not necessarily from the standpoint of it being attacked. I think a lot of times we'll see that a group of dogs will go to that weak energy and somehow coax the dog out of it, right? If you have a dog that's fearful in the corner and snapping at every dog that comes past it, or timid and shaking and stuff, I'll notice that more dogs than not will constantly go up and kind of push the dog and push the dog and push the dog. And whether that's to try to get a rise out of the dog.
Do you mean Vera?
Yeah, she's good for that for sure.
Whether it's to get a rise out of the dog, or whether it's just because they understand that there's unstable energy going on here and this dog needs some coaxing to get out of this negative headspace they're in.
Do you find that actually helping that dog?
All the time.
Yeah.
Yeah, because one of the things I remember noticing all the time when we first started doing a lot of socialization related stuff was that we would try to stop the dogs from doing it, right? How many times when you first started, I'm sure we kind of did that to some extent.
We police the dogs way
police
too
stuff
much.
all the time, right? How many times would there be a dog in the corner that another dog would go near it? It's like, right?
Yeah.
Little teeth or a little air snap or something. And then what we would do is we would get on the dog that was pushing their buttons and we'd be like, oh, you're not reading this dog's cues. When in actuality, that dog needed that dog to get in their space, because if they just left them to their own devices, that whole 12 hours that they were in daycare, they would just be in the corner the entire time by themselves. But with dogs constantly coming up and pushing them a little bit and pushing them a little bit, it forces them to try something else. The hiding doesn't work. This unstable behavior that I'm exhibiting right now doesn't work, so I need to exhibit a different one to try to work myself through it. So I think he's kind of onto something. I think the problem is, when did we figure out this book came out? Like early 2000s?
2006, yeah.
So 2006, right? Like, I think that the problem was it wasn't experimented with quite enough at that point, right? A lot of this was just theories, and they were theories that were accurate to an extent.
Do you think he's changed his mindset on this?
Big time. We were talking about this last time.
Yeah.
We were talking about how he utilizes some obedience now. He has like trainer. I actually looked into this a little bit since the last podcast. He has trainers on staff that now do actual obedience training with the dogs and stuff. And you could do like one-on-ones with them and stuff. But the philosophy around what he's trying to teach still is the way that you're living with your dog, right?
Right.
So pretty interesting. Back to the book.
Maybe we
Can we
should
take
do.
just a moment?
Oh, yeah, we can take
Okay.
just a moment.
Yeah, I just need to like take 5 really quick.
Okay, go for
Okay,
it.
cool.
We're going to keep talking, though.
That's fine.
Okay. Josh, go ahead. What were you going
I
to
was
say?
just gonna say, does he have another book,
Does that
like
mean we gotta
a
get
newer
over
book out? Because if he does, that means we have to review that now.
We're going.
Cesar's got a lot of books out. You know what I considered doing, actually? Is I considered...
a Cesar book review podcast.
That's all this is going to be, because I got like 6 of them downstairs we got to go over. No, I considered his book on the training methods and stuff, bringing some of that stuff into this conversation as well, and discussing those things. So we'll definitely get into some of that. But I don't think he has a new book out right now. I think most of his stuff he's doing is digital. And also one thing that I've seen that he's doing a lot is he's pushing his son hardcore. I think it's Andre or whichever one it is.
Okay.
But his son is like becoming the new like dog whisperer.
Is his son a kid?
I think he's probably like in his 20s, early 20s, something like that. So like most of his TV shows that he has now, like he still does like Cesar 911, I'm pretty sure. And most of his social media, and when he does those like traveling seminar things and stuff, most of those are currently with his son like heading most of that stuff. It's interesting.
Imagine that pressure. Like Cesar Milan's
Yeah.
son, and now he's like pushing you to
I bet he
the
gets it.
family legacy.
I bet they ask if Cesar trains the dogs all the time.
Yeah.
Not his son.
Yeah, it's not.
So was
you, right?
so Andre, did Cesar handle my dog?
Did your dad take
Did
care of him?
Cesar do any training? Oh
At
man.
least give him a 1-over, you know?
Yeah, did he at least make sure you did a good job?
Are we talking about his sons?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Caesar said that he disowned one of his sons the other day because he wasn't doing a good job with the dogs.
Was he serious?
He actually like compared the two of them too. He's like, my son Calvin did better than Andre, but Andre fixed himself.
You know, since 3 of my boss reviews were negative, I have to disown 3 of you guys tomorrow as well. I don't even know who wrote them, but
You have to
3 of
figure
you
it
guys
out.
are on the chopping block tomorrow.
Is that accurate?
no.
Were there really 3
Wow.
negative ones?
No, I actually made that up. I think there was like, you know what was interesting is like 3 of them were just like as neutral as they come, where it was like, wow, this actually doesn't help me at all.
Yeah, yeah.
And then like 1 of them was like real harsh, and then like 2 of them were just like moderately like.
I feel like I had
critique.
like 2
No,
that.
She was like,
No, mine was actually super neutral because I have no problem just like telling either one of you like what I think, because I feel like we're on that level. And I was on vacation when I did mine, so I was like, eh.
I think that was the exact breakdown though, because there was 7. I think there were 4 super neutral. I think there were 2 moderately critiquing where it was good information I was getting, and then there was 1 that was like, ouch.
Oh, I feel like I had like 2 that were just like.
Ouch. It's like, thanks, guys.
I'll feign surprise, like I don't know.
What were you going to say?
Nothing.
Oh, you were going to tell us about yours.
No.
You started loosening up with it and giving us details, then you stopped.
I
That's
was
okay.
going to.
All right. Where did we leave off here? Before Emily had to stop. Okay, here we go. Nature polices its own. Our tendency to rescue others comes from our emotional energy. Our compassion and our loving natures are beautiful things and part of the miracle of being human. But to other animals, emotional energy can be perceived as weakness. Love is a soft energy, so when it comes to pack survival, at least, love on its own is indeed a kind of weakness. Animals won't follow soft or weak energy. They won't follow compassionate energy. St. Francis of Assisi, and its birds, notwithstanding, animals won't follow a spiritual leader. They won't follow a lovable leader, nor will they follow overly excited energy. Yeah, see, guys, they won't follow a lovable leader. I can't be lovable.
I agree with that. I feel like that's
They follow overly excited energy.
that's no reason to not pet
They
a
might-
dog, though.
they might believe in something.
All right, let's get through this next paragraph, guys. We are a pack-oriented species, but as I've said, we are also the only species on the planet that will follow an unstable leader. Animals, whether horses, dogs, cats, or sheep, will follow only a stable leader. That leader's balance is reflected in his consistently calm, assertive energy. So when we project excited or loving or emotional or even overly aggressive energy to the animals in our lives, especially if that is the only energy we're projecting, they are much more likely to see us as followers, not as leaders. Next section, to lead or to follow. So this gets into that. So we're going to finish this section before we discuss that. To dogs, there are only 2 positions in a relationship, leader and follower, dominant and submissive. It's either black or white. There's no in-between in their world. When a dog lives with a human, in order for the human to be able to control the dog's behavior, she must take the commitment to take on the role of pack leader 100% of the time. It's that simple. Are you the pack leader? It doesn't seem that simple, however, for many of my clients. Hundreds of them keep calling me because they are desperate, because their dog's problem behaviors are totally controlling their lives. Perhaps some of them have a hard time getting their minds around the dominant, submissive paradigm.
Paradigm.
Yeah, that. Because in the human world, those words sometimes can come with baggage attached. When we hear the word dominance, perhaps we think of a wife beater, a drunk at a bar fight, a playground bully extorting lunch money from the classroom rent, or even a masked man or woman in an S&M club with leather and whips.
He got really oddly descriptive with that. How do you know all of this, Cesar?
Didn't he have all those like sexual innuendos last time as
Talking
well?
about genitals
Yeah.
last time.
I said that specific. S&M club with
Yeah,
leather and whips.
jeez. But I wouldn't know where that is.
The word conjures up images of cruelty in our minds. It's important to remember that in the animal kingdom, the word cruelty doesn't exist, and dominance isn't a moral judgment or an emotional experience. It is simply a state of being, a behavior that is natural in nature, as is mating or eating or play. Submissive, as we refer to it here, is not the ethical judgment either. It doesn't designate an animal or human who is a wimp or overly pliable. Submissive doesn't mean vulnerable or ineffectual. It is merely the energy and the state of mind of a follower. Among all pack species, there has to be some degree of dominance and submission in order for any hierarchy to function. Think of an office full of workers. What would happen if they all came in and left whenever they felt like it? Took 4-hour lunches, argued with one another and the boss all day. It would be chaos, right? You don't consider an employee who comes to work on time, gets along with his fellow workers, and completes his tasks with minimum conflict to be weak, do you? No, you consider her to be cooperative, a good team player. But in order for there even to be a team, that employee has to accept a degree of submission in her mindset. She has to implicitly understand that the boss makes the decisions, and it's her job to follow them. At the risk of being considered politically incorrect, I still use the terms dominant and submissive. To me, they accurately describe the natural social structure of dogs. For a dog, there are no judgments attached to the issue of who in the pack is dominant or who is submissive. Be it a pack of dogs or a pack consisting of one dog and one human, a dog doesn't take it personally if you take over the leadership position for him. In my experience, most dogs are relieved to know their owners are the ones in charge. Now that we've integrated them into the human world, there are lots of complicated daily decisions to be made that nature hasn't equipped dogs to make. Dogs can't hail a taxi or push a shopping cart or get money out of the ATM. I bet you we could train dogs to do all three of those different things. At least not without some very specialized training. Okay, there we go. Dogs can sense this, and I've seen thousands of dogs visibly relaxed for the first time in their lives once the owners finally commit to a true leadership position. But mark my words, when a dog senses that his owner isn't up to the challenge of pack leadership, he will step in to try to fill this void. It's in his nature to do this, to try to keep the pack functional. The way your dog sees it, somebody has to run the show. And when a dog takes over the role, it often has disastrous results for both the dog and the human.
I feel like I have so many things to say.
We're ready for him.
First of all, I think that's where like Cesar shoots himself in the foot, is that like dominant thing. Like there's no need, I think, as in our industry to talk about
Is this thing
dominance.
still filming?
Do you guys agree with that?
That there's no need to talk about dominant.
Yeah.
Why?
At least that word.
Why?
I think that there's just other ways to get people to kind of pick up what you're putting down without being like, you need to dominate your dog. So like telling them like you need to be a good leader, like telling them like how to like work them through things. I tell people to like coach, not coddle a lot. I found that to be really beneficial. I do think that the word dominance has like a negative connotation with it. So that was kind of my first point.
What's your second point?
I kind of lost track of that. I did have something really good too. Oh, do you guys talk about the leadership aspect with your clients at all?
So I talk a lot about the aspect that always somebody needs to be in charge,
Sure.
right? And just like he said right there, whether you want to call it dominance or you want to call it leadership or whether you want to call it the alpha, right? How many times do you hear that one?
I don't think that that's beneficial either, because I think that some people don't have that within them to be like.
But here's the thing, right? Our job is to coach owners to become something,
Absolutely.
right?
And I think that I can do that, but in a way that is like, and I think that, I think that you do
What
that.
would you call it? So what would you call being in charge of situations, leading and guiding your dog?
A leader.
Okay.
Yeah. I think that by calling someone a leader, that doesn't have a negative connotation with it. Mm-hmm. How do I get my dog comfortable with a situation? Because we talked about...
So do you think that a leader is dominant over their dog?
Assertive.
Aren't they kind of interchangeable?
I would not say that dominance is the same as... Dominant to me is overbearing. It is to take over a situation. Assertiveness, leadership, I think that...
Aren't you taking over a situation by being assertive?
I think that taking over, to me, is almost like a dictatorship. A leader is someone that you naturally incline to just want to follow because you know that they have control of it.
Because they have a dominant personality.
They have an assertive personality.
Okay.
Sounds like some beta shit. Just kidding. I'm kidding.
Listen, I agree that some of these words have kind of negative connotations attached to them, right? I think that by saying I'm dominating a dog, that sounds cruel. That sounds like alpha rolling bullshit and all that kind of stuff, right?
Well, I think it kind of just it ties into like a lot of trainers that talk about like dominance theory, and a lot of people like buy into that. So kind of steering away from using that word so we get out of that mindset definitely does help.
Are you hip to the whole dominance theory stuff?
Somewhat.
Explain it to me, because I'm not super fluent in it.
Oh God.
Well, go for it if you want.
No, you're up.
I'm passionate about this one.
Yeah.
So how many clients have we gotten that have gone to other trainers who have felt just so belittled by them?
By the trainer you're talking.
Because
Sure.
they have that dominance, like militant kind of, like take control of your dog.
Sure,
Like,
sure.
I think a lot of trainers that use that like theory as the basis of their training methods though don't actually understand how to train a dog. I think they kind of, from what I see when trainers like use that like philosophy to like train the dog, it just seems like they aren't really doing like the training side of it as much as like, I don't know how to explain that.
It's the balance, right? So I think what we're missing here, or I think what we're trying to get at here, is the balance of the two. So like dominance without compassion is that asshole side of dog training that we see, right?
Sure.
It's that like, hey, you're doing it wrong and you're not correcting the dog firmly enough and it's your fault, and I know I'm in charge of dogs because they get that personality that they're scared of me and this, you know what I mean? It's that like macho personality. And I feel like I understand what you're saying, where you could call it something different for the sake of removing yourself from kind of what a lot of people have coined, right? There's a lot of political examples that you could describe like that, right? Where we're removing ourselves from certain words because of the negative connotation that they have attached to them, right? Even if they weren't intentionally meant to be that or whatever it may be, right? It's not good to use them because of that reason, right? So I'm with you on that. But I think that still the meaning, the original intended meaning of a lot of these things, and this one in particular, right, dominance, still is just that. I think it was given a bad name by a lot of people that misused it.
I think dominance and submissive are still words that can be used in dog training because
Sure.
I just think like less frequently than trainers that have the dominance theory play into a lot of like how they're training a dog, because we still see it all the time in social situations where dogs are trying to figure out who's more dominant or who's more submissive.
Yes. And that was my next point. So
Your third point.
there is my third point. So I totally agree that I think in describing your dog, you can use the dominant submissive explanation, but I've noticed at least with my clients, and it happened today actually, we were at Home Depot, and every time we get around people, the lady walking her dog, I saw the dog would get more nervous, start kind of anxiously moving. And then whenever we were in like secluded situations, the dog was like in tune with her, just moving fluidly. And it's because of her confidence in that situation. So I think that most of our clients are here because they have the lack of confidence. So telling them like, Brenda, you need to dominate your dog right now. You need to be the dominant one. That's not going to be beneficial, I guess, was my point with that.
Yeah.
Sure. I think that you need to your point, you need to be more specific of what needs to happen, right? I think dominant also, or any number of words, any of those words, be more assertive or be more this or be more that, they're kind of gray as far as what's the expectation of it.
Yeah.
Exactly. And
Right.
I think that I do break that part down too. Like
Yeah.
you... like walking with forward energy. Like I do use like Cesar's tactics in my training more, but I'm very specific and I pointed out what I'm looking for.
Yeah. Yeah, I think just being more clear with what the expectation is, like how, again, it's more of, I have the conversation with clients a lot of like, they're like, they told me to stop babying the dog or to be more assertive with the dog or to do this or to do that or take more charge of the situation or whatever word you want to use. But the problem comes down to how. How do I do that?
And I think our program is modeled to take leadership, but also pointing that out, I think, is the other half.
I would agree with that. Yeah, no, I am team not using the term dominant, right? I agree with you that it has a bad name to it, and it kind of is annoying. I think the worst one for me, because when I first started in dog training, I feel like the word was still pretty big, was like being the alpha, which I think was really the bullshit one of like, oh my God, you gotta be the alpha. I know I'm the alpha over my dog. Or they'll look and be like, so does he think that like you're the alpha right now? It's like, I don't know. He just knows that what I want him to do and that I'm gonna make him do it, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, all right. Next part here, skipping forward a little bit. Next section, he just kind of talked a little bit about specific dogs he worked with. He did some name dropping, talking about Oprah's dog, Sophie. We don't want to listen to that. So we're going to jump to rules, boundaries, and limitations. More catchphrases. He's good with those.
He is good with those.
All right. This is like the Cesar bashing part 2. We're kind of we're all on Cesar's case right now. Mm-hmm. All right, guys. Rules, boundaries, and limitations. In nature, a pack leader makes rules and sticks to them. A pack couldn't survive without rules, no matter what the species. In many human households, the rules, boundaries, and limitations for dogs are unclear, if they exist at all. Just like children, dogs need rules, boundaries, and limitations in order to be properly socialized. In Oprah's household, for example, name dropping, Sophie didn't have many rules, and those that did exist weren't always followed. Sometimes, for instance, when Sophie would whine after Oprah left her alone, Oprah would relent, come back, and take Sophie with her. Other times, she'd come back and tell Sophie to stop it. It's probably because Sophie wanted to get on that private jet, you know? Give me some of that caviar. Right? Take me to that masseuse.
You know that we would all name drop if we had the
Oh, yeah, for
famous
sure.
client.
I still name drop sometimes.
Right.
But usually,
Gidley.
But usually, the behavior had already escalated past the point of correction. Both human and animal psychologists call this intermittent reinforcement. And if you are a parent, you probably know that this type of discipline never works. If you allow your child to sneak a cookie from the jar one day and punish him for it the next, the child will always try again, on and off. Chance that he'll get away with it. The same goes for dogs. Intermittent reinforcement of rules is a surefire way to raise an unbalanced, unstable dog. Dogs that know the rules with consistency follow them. Dogs are opportunists. They will keep trying if the reward, when they get away with it sometimes, is good enough. Despite the fact that Sophie had lived in an unbalanced state for 10 years without solid rules, boundaries, or limitations, I stressed to Oprah that it was almost never too late for a dog to be rehabilitated. Even humans can turn their own lives around at age 50, 60, or 70, and we have many more issues than dogs do. Oprah was looking forward to working on the problem, but was shocked when I arrived at her house with 5 other dogs. Coco, our Chihuahua, Lita and Rex, our Italian Greyhound pair, and Lasso Aspo named Luigi, who belongs to Will Smith and Jada Pinkett Smith. More names. Guys, come on. Why does he have Will Smith's dog, by the way?
Wait, Will Smith has a Lhasa Apso?
Apparently so.
And
Luigi.
Rottweilers, actually.
Maybe not anymore. This
Also,
wasn't
I'm pretty
Kevin
sure-
Hart's got 2 Doberman.
Really?
Very
Yeah.
cool.
Cali
Yeah,
K9
he's got to
trains
make up for that height.
That's right. Yeah, seriously. They are pretty big, too. They're
Bigger
pretty
than
large
him.
dogs. Yeah.
Wow.
All right. And the dog that made Oprah the most nervous, Daddy, the burly and very scary-looking pit bull who spends time in my pack when his owner, hip-hop artist Redman, is on the road. Daddy actually has the best energy of all the dogs in the pack. I first met him when he was 4 months old, when Redman brought him to my newly opened center. It has become a fad amongst rap artists to have big, tough-looking dogs for status. Redman was different. He was a responsible dog owner. He said, I want a dog I can take anywhere in the world with me. I don't want a lawsuit. I started working with Daddy that day, and he has never missed a day of being fulfilled as a dog. Everybody who meets him falls in love with him, even though on the outside he's very formidable. Daddy has helped hundreds of dogs become balanced simply by sharing his own calm, submissive energy. And he's a pit bull, which goes to show you that when it comes to dog behavior, energy and balance can and do overcome the influence of the breed. All the dogs I brought with me to Oprah were very balanced dogs. They were there to give Sophie group therapy. Sophie's reaction to the other dogs was pretty predictable. When she first saw them, she stood on the doorstep, frozen, between fight, flight, avoidance, and submission. She was choosing avoidance. I moved her down among the dogs and gave her a slight correction with the leash every time I noticed her lip begin to curl up, as she became fearful and anxious. My energy was calm and assertive at times. At first, I actually had to ask Oprah to remove herself from the situation. She was so terrified that Sophie was picking up on her energy. After about 10 minutes, Sophie was able to relax. In about half an hour, she was picking up on the group's calm, submissive energy and seemed actually to be enjoying herself. She was still tentative, but her body language was becoming calm and relaxed. That's the problem, or that's the power of the pack at work for you. A group of balanced dogs helping an unstable dog turn around in a matter of minutes. But the energy I was sending Sophie through the leash was vital too. I was her pack leader. I was instructing her to get along with the rest of the pack. No ifs, ands, or buts about it. And Sophie got the message. Oprah and Stedman were amazed to see Sophie interacting calmly with other dogs. Just the fact that it was even possible seemed thrilling to them. I gave them the homework of making a regular habit of allowing Sophie around other dogs while practicing calm, assertive leadership. Like a diet, calm, assertive leadership doesn't work unless you practice it every day. It was only through such regular therapy that Sophie would permanently change. What was going on with Sophie, guys? Sorry, I gotta turn my volume off.
Josh, this is all you.
I was doing our cameras. Thank you. Which this one finally died.
Does this one get us all?
No. I mean, I'd have to move it. But I was going to say, I might have to wrap this up pretty soon. We're getting in there.
We're going to give it a couple minutes here. So
Sophie?
you threw me off, Josh.
Sorry.
So Sophie was the only issue was not that she was having issues with other dogs. The issue was that they weren't just socializing her in a free way, right? This isn't anything to do with calm, assertively giving corrections for,
It was just lack
going
of
after dogs or anything.
exposure.
This was a lack of exposure, right? 9 out of 10 times when we get clients that come in, they are not able to they're not able to put the dog in these situations because they try to micromanage too much. They try to hold them back. They don't put them in the situations because they're scared of all the franticness. In Sophie's case, I remember when I read this book, she was just a firecracker and would bark at all the other dogs and this and that. And the problem is, and I made a post about it today from Miracle, is reactivity does not equate to aggression, right? No matter what way you spin it, the reactive side of things is not aggression. Just because a dog is barking and growling and stuff at the end of a leash doesn't mean that they're going to attack the other dogs, because the leash is what's creating that problem, right? It's that frustrated response of pulling into the leash and digging into it and barking, growling, lunging, all that kind of stuff. They can't get away. They're pulling into the end of the leash. It's creating frustration. It's creating that behavior. So when you take that away and you just put them in with that group of dogs, whether he was giving corrections for the lip curling or not, she probably would have been fine after a couple of minutes. And that's why we're able to get quick breakthroughs with socialization. We're able to see it because we put them in that pack setting and we allow them to express themselves. And because of that, we don't see very many problems with it.
Mm-hmm. Do you feel like Cesar kind of took the lead as far as like just socializing dogs with other dogs? I think
he did a lot of it.
Yeah.
I think he did it in a little bit more controlled of a way than a lot of people typically will. I think that a lot of his method of doing it originally was on leash stuff, pack walks and stuff. He talked a lot about introducing other dogs to other dogs through the walk, right? But the idea was just putting them together, right? You take this dog that's freaking out at the end of the leash and you put it close to another dog, and it's probably going to chill out, especially if you start giving it direction also. Now, the problem is where maybe he got lost early on in things, and where a lot of other trainers will get lost with things, is that when you're socializing with other dogs, you could micromanage all day long, and I could take a dog and I could put it with other dogs that has a history of aggression or reactivity, and I can correct any sign that they're even interested in that dog, and I can get them to coexist very, very easily, right? And that's what a lot of other trainers will do through socializing, through like bed stays and all that kind of stuff, where it's like they got 17 dogs in beds and they're like, look at all these dogs, 50% of them used to have aggression issues and 50% of them had anxiety and this and that, and they're all able to be together. But the problem is not necessarily can they follow leadership around other dogs. That's the first step of the equation, is the control and making sure that you can get them under control around them, but they have to learn how to actually interact with those dogs. So I would say yeah, he did, but I think that it's gotten pushed a little bit further,
Does he use muzzles or anything?
I don't know if I've ever seen him use them before.
I mean, he's just really into he'll make sure that the dog is submissive with his energy first. Mm-hmm. I feel like that's actually kind of bit him in the ass before by doing that.
Well, it forces you to kind of be a little bit more firm with a dog than you probably need to be.
Right.
Even again, Blake, I know Blake did a lot of work with Cesar back in the day. And because of that, Blake early on in his training, I know a lot of his trainers were a little kind of weirded out because he didn't use muzzles. He was actually kind of against them, and he would tell his staff, muzzles are for people that don't know how to read body language, right? Which, you could have that kind of ego push of like, yeah, I could probably work with all these aggressive dogs and like stay somewhat safe and like read the dog well enough where I could predict before they're going to try to bite me or anything like that. But in the end of the day, like, that's not wise because it's going to force me to do things that I don't necessarily have to do out of the assumption that maybe the dog is going to do something.
Or you can't put them in like a situation that you would want to put them in. Like, I think a
Not
good example.
safely, at least.
Yeah. I think a good example is like how when we introduce a dog into social, muzzled or not, we let the dogs kind of flood them and put that pressure on them and see how they react with it.
Yeah.
The words and I'll do it.
I've never really cared a whole lot. I mean, if you want a dog trained in a different language. Oh, by the way, we had to pause for a second. We're back at it. So, here we are. Yeah, I'll train a dog in whatever language you want. The word
Really?
is kind of irrelevant. I mean, a lot of people get hung up on, you got to use our words, right?
Someone, I think Bridget just asked me, she was like, David was training a dog in a totally different language. And I was like, it's probably because there was a foundation
It
set or
wasn't
they
a
just
different
wanted.
language. I know which dog she was talking about. It's from yesterday. It's just different weird words. For whatever reason, they train with some guy out in like Ashland. And like he uses like instead of bed, he uses climb. Which, whatever. You want to use climb, you use climb.
What?
And
Okay,
then,
Miley Cyrus.
and then, again, release words. People are big on release words. Like they want to use free because they've been using it forever for their dogs.
I
So
don't
it's like,
care if that's what you want me to
you know what I
use.
mean? Like, it is what it is. And then what else? They're pretty insistent on using heel instead of, like, come for, like, following and stuff, which, whatever.
I haven't had anybody say that
That's
to
the
me.
only one I'm a little back and forth on because it's like, listen,
You're not
we're
gonna
going to have to use two interchangeable commands then because heel, I'm not going to use heel to recall the dog to me, right? You can. I've seen people do it before, and it's not incorrect, right? What is the heel position? The heel position means you have to come to me to get in the heel
Yeah.
position, right? It's just kind of weird then when
Yeah.
you start adding that in. So, whatever, it is what it is. So, anyways, back to the book here. We're going to finish out this section here and then leave some more for another time. So, moving back to it. A dog will usually accept a human as its pack leader if that human projects a correct, calm, assertive energy, sets solid rules, boundaries, and limitations, and acts responsibly in the cause of the pack's survival. This doesn't mean that we can't still be uniquely human pack leaders. Just as dogs shouldn't have to give up what's unique about them to live with us, we shouldn't have to give up what's so special about being human. We are, for instance, the only pack leaders who are going to love the dogs in the way we humans define love. Their canine pack leader will not buy them squeaky toys, throw birthday parties for them. Their canine pack leaders won't directly reward their good behavior. He won't turn around and say, gee, guys, thanks for following me 10 miles. It's expected that they do that. A mother dog won't say, you pups have behaved so well today. Let's go to the beach. Positive reinforcement. This is the problem. I got to disconnect the human training and the dog training side of things. I'm sorry to all the Miracles canine staff. I'll give you more positive reinforcement. In their natural world, the reward is in the process. That's the concept we humans could sometimes do well to remember. For a dog, there's a reward in simply fitting in with that pack and helping to ensure its survival. Cooperation automatically results in the primal rewards of food, water, play, and sleep. Rewarding our dogs with treats and the things that they love is one way we can bond with them and reinforce good behavior. But if we don't project strong leadership energy before we give rewards, we're never going to have a truly functional pack. Next section. Homeless pack leaders. Have you guys ever seen homeless people with dogs?
Yeah, it's kind of impressive. Yeah. Very impressive, actually.
Right? I remember I was last time I was in Chicago, I made a post about it. This was a couple years ago, but I remember seeing all of the homeless people that had dogs, and they're some of the most well-behaved, balanced dogs you'll ever see. Right? And that's because I think that the human has so many other things that they need to worry about that they can't go through that process of over-humanizing their dog, right? They have so many real survival things that they have to focus on and pay mind to and get past that they can't go through and just be like, let me buy you that squeaky toy and let me do this and let's go play and do all of these different things because we got to go, find a job or pedal for money or do whatever it may be.
I think also part of it is that I literally lost my train of thought. Scratch that.
What is it, Krista?
I did
2
have
beers in, those
something.
lost loggers. What else? Homeless pack leaders. While the human-dog bond is unique on both sides of the equation, we can't just play the role of best friend or dog lover. Whether we know it or not, when we play that role, we are automatically fulfilling our own needs first, not our dogs. We're the ones who need the constant affection and the unconditional acceptance. Who do you think are among the happiest, most emotionally stable dogs in America? This is my observation, and you may find it pretty hard to believe, but I think that dogs that live with homeless people often have the most fulfilling, balanced lives. Go to downtown Los Angeles someday, or to the park overlooking the Santa Monica Pier, and pick out the homeless people who have dogs. Those dogs don't exactly look like American Kennel Club champs, but they're almost always well-behaved and non-aggressive. Watch the homeless person walking with a dog, and you will witness a good example of a pack leader, pack follower body language. I've never seen a dog pull a homeless person before. Never.
That's actually kind of true.
Never
Yeah.
in my life.
Probably because they're like lazy from lack of food.
It's an energy thing, Krista.
Yeah.
Krista.
I was going to say that I think part of it is the constant exposure. That's what I was going
It's
to say.
big time, the constant exposure too, especially in a city environment. You figure they're around all these different things all the time. But here's the thing. Well, I guess this is not a great example. I was going to say all of the dogs that just live in like downtown Chicago or downtown New York have the constant exposure too, but they don't necessarily, because the homeless ones are forced to be outside all the time, 24/7, 7 days a week. Where the ones that live in houses and stuff, if they're having problems, they can just isolate them to the house still. So though they're exposed to it all the time, they haven't been forced to deal with it, right?
What do
Like
you
their
mean?
reactive behavior, right? So for example, if you live in downtown Chicago and you have a dog, right? And every time you go to take that dog for a walk, the dog freaks out and loses its mind at other people. You can go hide back in your house, right? The dog can freak out and learn that when they do that, you'll take them back home, right? If you're a homeless person and you have a dog, you can't do that. You have to stay outside in all of that chaos all the time. So at some point, the dog is going to kind of get used to it and realize, well, my owner is not going to take me anywhere right now. I'm going to have to just kind of deal with this, right? Usually the homeless person doesn't have a leash, but the dog follows either beside the human or just behind her. The dog is migrating with his pack leader, the way nature has ingrained in him. Homeless people, you ask, how can their dogs be happier? They can't afford to feed them expensive organic food. They can't take them to the groomer twice a month, or even to the vet. How true. But remember, dogs don't know the difference between organic and regular dog food, or home-cooked meals. They don't know about groomers, and in nature, there aren't any vets. Many times, homeless people don't even have goals in their lives, not the way some type A achievers do, anyway. Some of them seem to be content to walk from place to place, pick up cans, and seek a meal and warm place to sleep. This lifestyle might seem unacceptable to many humans, but for a dog, this is the ideal, natural routine that nature created for him. He is getting the consistent amount of primal exercise that he needs, and he is free to travel. In nature, all animals have territories, some large and some small, which they love to traverse over and over again. Exploration is a natural animal trait, and genetically it's equated with survival, because the more an animal explores, the more likely it is to find food and water, and the more information it will have about the world. In LA, I've observed the dogs that live with homeless people really get to know their city far better than the dogs that live in Bel Air. The dog that lives in Bel Air has a giant backyard, but to him it's just a big kennel. The homeless dog gets to wander for miles, then go to bed tired. The Bel Air dog gets to see the house, the inside of the car, and the groomers, then goes to bed with another day's worth of pent-up energy and frustration. Balance in a dog isn't created by giving them material things. It's created by allowing them to express fully the physical and psychological parts of their being. Living with a homeless person, a dog migrates for food, it usually works for food, and even without a leash. There's a clear leader-follower relationship between the person and the dog. Many of the people who call me in to help them have trouble walking their dogs because of all the distractions that cause the dog to pull on the leash or run away or bark. Kids, cars, other dogs, they think this is the dog's problem. But check out a dog with a homeless person. The dog has never been to a training academy in his life. He and the homeless person walk along the busy streets passing cats, strollers, scooters, people with yapping little dogs on flexi leashes, yet the dog keeps on moving forward. This is what happens in nature. A dog, or wolf pack, would never hold together if individual dogs were running off all the time, getting distracted by frogs or butterflies. Those are two random things to get distracted by. The homeless person acts as if the pack leader if the dog gets distracted. She only has to send a glance or a grunt in the dog's way to remind him of the rules and get him back on track. At the end of the day, the homeless person will reward the dog with food and affection right before settling down to sleep. They share a very elemental existence, probably very much like the earliest relationships between our human ancestors and dogs. Oh, boy. Wild times, guys.
He knows a lot about homeless people and dogs.
Well, because he
Homeless
was
dogs.
homeless.
Los
He
Angeles.
was?
too.
Yeah,
I do believe they did talk about that a little bit in the first chapter of this
Oh.
book.
Well, Chris hasn't read it.
I know. That's why I'm reiterating.
Do you want to borrow it? By the
Just that
way,
you can borrow this book
Way
if
to
you'd
put
like.
me under pressure. Sure. Yeah.
you can say no.
Go actually read it.
Maybe. Just give me time. But getting on, I used to work right next to Santa Monica Pier, and I don't think I ever saw a homeless person with a dog without a leash. They always
Interesting.
I
had
think
a
the
leash.
without the leash thing might be a little bit of an exaggeration.
Yeah. Dogs are not following you down in LA without a leash.
Though I have seen plenty of times before in Gordon Square, right around the corner by the shop. I saw people riding their bikes with dogs without leashes before.
Really?
It's interesting to see again. So dissecting this down into, situations where it's like, how do we equate this to the real life and what we observe with dogs, right? There is so much to having that mentality of, I've got my dog and I don't really care about the perceived notions of what that relationship should look like because I feel like I'm in charge and I'm going to provide these things for them and I'm going to understand it's a dog, I'm a human, I need to coach it, I need to guide it, I need to live it, I need to dominate it. I need to do all of these different things. I'm joking there, obviously. And I think that, when you see some of those type of people that have that relationship with their dogs, it's frustrating sometimes because it's like, you look at that and you think, okay, cool, you have this relationship with your dog where you're able to do all of these types of things. And frankly, the dog is fairly balanced, right? The dog is fairly adaptive of the world, and you can put them in these different situations. They're not going to have all these different problems and stuff. But the problem there is that the owner doesn't get the other side of the equation, the training side of things, which we keep coming back to, and they don't understand how that stuff is just as important from a safety standpoint and from if you're going to have that relationship with your dog and be able to take them everywhere, because of the society that we live in, because of the things that we do with our dogs, we have to have that training balanced where we're not letting them do all of these different things and we can manage them in these situations, right? Just because you could have your dog off leash riding next to your bicycle with you doesn't mean you should be doing that. Just because your dog can greet every person that you see walking down the street or every person in the bar doesn't mean you should be doing that, right? Mm-hmm. I do trivia at Platform every Monday typically, and a couple weeks ago or a month ago or whatever it was, there's some guy there that one of our friends knew, and he had his dog, and the dog was just laying next to him, and the leash was not in his hand. It was just laying on the ground and stuff, and the dog wasn't obviously in a command or anything. It's not like this dog was trained, but he had that type of relationship with the dog where you could tell, like, he would tell the dog to do something, and he would say it with, like, authority, and the dog would kind of, like, listen to him and maybe kind of sort of do something, but 90% of the time, because that dog was in a somewhat balanced state of mind, it just kind of wandered around the bar and would just go up to random people, and the guy like would get up and he like went to the bathroom, I remember, and just left the dog there wandering around the bar and stuff. And it's just like, you have this side of the equation, right? You have the stuff Cesar's talking about in this book where it's like, you have to be able to develop that relationship where you have that assertiveness over your dog and you have that ability to put them in these situations and understand them well enough to communicate with them. But then you have the other side of the equation of how do I, when you put them in those situations, what things do I need to do in order to manage them effectively, And I think that's where the balance comes into play.
Yeah. Like maybe that dog was okay at the bar, not doing anything without commands, but is that okay to let your dog wander the bar?
Yeah. And it's interesting. I mean, that's like also when we had our training center down in Columbus, one of the things I think that blew my mind when we first had our facility down there is they don't have leash laws, right? So Cleveland has leash laws. You cannot take your dog to any park in Cleveland and legally let them off leash to run around. Columbus, their leash laws in quotations, are signs that they have posted throughout the parks that just say your dog must be under direct control at all times. Now, in theory, that's cool, right? In theory, wow, I could take my dog to the park, I could let him off leash, I could enjoy them, this, that. But here's the thing. What does under direct control mean?
Let me tell you how many times I've gotten into like arguments with people who
Verbal,
say they have
borderline physical altercations with people.
who
It's
say
ridiculous.
that they have control over the dog when they clearly do not.
Yeah. It's nuts. And I remember that was the thing is it's weird because, you know, you'd go to those places and you'd be like, wow, this is cool. You could have your dog off leash. You could do all these different things with them. And frankly, because owners were able to do those things with their dogs, the dogs were more well-behaved, right? 9 out of 10 times, those dogs that were off leash that probably had little to no training, they weren't running off and chasing things and darting after every person and stuff like that. But the problem was there was no control from the owner where if we needed them to get their dog away from us or something, they couldn't do it, right? So yes, when you have that type of relationship with your dog and when you have a balanced dog, your dog is able to do more things. The problem is not everybody has a balanced dog, and we have to abide by these rules, and we have to create an environment that, or we have to create a world that has rules for dogs, and we need to follow those management techniques because of everybody else's, to be accommodating of everybody else's dogs.
I think it's like super inconsiderate to not have a trained dog take it off leash and just like not give a fuck if it's going up to another person's dog. And like your dog might be fine with other dogs, but imbalanced or whatever, but you don't know about those other dogs too.
Yeah. And you could look at like whose fault is that, right? Like, is that the dog's fault that's running up to the dog that's not good with other dogs' fault, or is that the fault of the owner of that dog for not keeping them under control, or is it the fault of the dog that's having the issue with another dog coming up to them and sniffing them?
It's the owner that has the dog that doesn't have control.
No, I understand that, right? So I agree with you with that. But it's weird because, again, in the wild, right?
But we're not in the wild.
I know, but looking at this from the standpoint of, okay, cool. So in nature, right? If another dog went up to another dog, they would kind of just figure it out to some extent, right? Unfortunately, what I'm getting at is that we don't live in that kind of world, right? So because of that, people need to be more accommodating of those types of things.
Well,
right?
Let's just go to like in the wild, let's say, and I don't really know, but this is just my thoughts on this. If you had one wolf pack and then you ran into another wolf pack. I can't say woof. If you have one wolf pack, like that pack knows, they know each other and they're not running into random wolves in the middle.
It's just
Wolves.
They're just running into random ones. God, you guys, I had a really solid point.
I'm listening.
If you have like one pack in the wild, they know each other. They're not running into random ones. And I think that if they do, it is turning into an altercation, probably, right? They're not just figuring it out like, hey, you want to join my pack over here? Or
I think then you get into the conversation of established territory and stuff. And would that dog have gone into that other dog's territory at that point?
Yeah.
Right? Or would that wolf go into that other wolf pack's territory?
yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
we put our dogs into these situations, right? I take my dog into another place that may be perceived by that other dog as their territory. You know what I mean? So because I am doing that, that puts the blame then back on the owner, right? So since the dogs can't control that and control where they go, since we're physically taking them to these places, we have to then accept the responsibility of controlling those situations as opposed to letting the dogs figure it out. I think is the way that we can dissect that situation. Questions, Emily?
I don't have questions. I think that I feel like we just overcomplicated that so much, honestly. Because my thought process was, so you watch Honeycomb for me, right? And for me, like Honeycomb can be like 3 feet behind me. Like she can mark on. I don't really care about those things because I know she's not going to approach another dog. I know that like she's doing the things, right? She can be.
Well, what's the things?
She's walking with me.
Well, is leaving you to mark things walking with you?
Well, I think what she's getting at is the things that she perceives as okay, right?
Yeah.
So what Emily determines as okay and not okay, Honeycomb understands and follows because she's been clear about those boundaries.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, like honey, like if I'm
The expectation if she's 4 feet behind you is not that she's healing with you.
Yeah.
The expectation is just that you're moving with me, right?
Yeah,
If you stop for half a second and then keep moving with me, that's probably fine.
Yeah.
right, because I have learned a lot with having B too. Like I feel that I have to manage B a lot more and keep that very like strict criteria because she's intense all the time. So I have to give her constant direction. Whereas Honeycomb, I don't feel like I need to do that. But at the same time, putting her in a position to like be with you and not vocalizing that like weird bond or criteria, like that puts her in a weird position. So do you know what I'm saying? And like I think with Vera too, could you take Vera on a hike knowing that she would walk perfectly with you off collar?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I guess I don't have that relationship.
But I don't think that's any fault of your own. I think you have a dog.
Wait. Are we talking about Honeycomb specifically or B specifically right now?
I was talking about Honeycomb specifically.
Honeycomb. Okay, so when you say, do you feel like you can go for a hike and have her walk perfectly with you off collar? Do you mean
She moseys.
no e-collar? Do you mean her staying in the heel position specifically and stuff? Or
I
what do
know
you
that
mean?
I could take Honeycomb and she will follow me through the woods
Yep.
the entire time. Probably like moseying around, like peeing on things or whatever, but she's still with me. She's
Sure.
not going to approach another dog. She's not going to be reactive.
Yep.
So I guess that's where me as a trainer, like I feel like that's kind of like the niche, but also putting her on someone else. Like how do you, I guess.
So just to clarify your question here, are you saying that you're okay with that because you feel like had you tried to stop the sniffing and have it this perfect heel and everything like that for that entire hike, it would have been sloppier? Is that kind of what you're saying?
I just don't mind it. I know
Sure.
that I used to keep
And I don't either.
I used to keep her super accountable of like a perfect walk. And I have gotten away with that because I've seen her gradually get to that point. So I guess my whole thing is like, what is, it is the energy part, you know, like the trusting of your dog. And my question is, do you guys agree with that, I suppose? Or do you find that to be...
Yeah, I mean, so I think to try to be specific about the question you were asking, if I go hiking with my dogs, right? If I do off-leash hiking with my dogs, I'm not working on like a perfect heel while I'm hiking with them, and I probably never would. I might do it for the first 2 minutes of the walk, but I know in that type of environment, that's going to be super stimulating for my dog. I know that's going to be very difficult for them to maintain long term, and I know I'm going to need to heavily micromanage it in order for them to do it, right? So because of that, I've always, when I hiked, enforced essentially like the 20-foot radius around me, right? If we're in a situation where there's not a ton of people around and stuff, stay within a 20-foot radius of me. Once you hit that 20-foot radius, I'm either going to give a correction with the e-collar, just to teach you to essentially check in with me and maintain that bubble, or I'm going to do a formal recall there to constantly enforce like, hey, once you get a little ways away from me, just check in, right?
Yeah.
And I've always maintained that criteria, right? And then Vera, for example, because she's a pretty laid-back dog, I don't need to do like this super tight, perfect heel position with her because I know that she'll loosely kind of follow me like that.
Right.
Now, I think that there's other dogs that they'll have a degree of that, right? But I think that it's going to be just harder to maintain in the long run. Right, Vinny is such a hyped up dog that no matter what I do, he's never going to be the dog that walks like 6 feet behind me.
Right.
That's just not him, right? Cade even, right? Cade is a little closer to it. Cade will do like kind of the loose, he'll maintain kind of like a loose heel position where he seems pretty relaxed and stuff throughout it, but it's definitely not a like way behind me kind of thing, right? So I try to understand when it comes to walking specifically, I try to understand the individual dog's needs, right? If you have a mork going into the dominant or submissive kind of thing, right? If you have a more submissive dog, or a dog that's going to take corrections and stuff like that a little bit more intensely and care more about those things, they tend to stay further back because they want to make sure they can see you. They want to make sure that, you know, hey, if I see mom, I know I'm in the right position. And what happens is we accept that as the criteria, so we don't necessarily care about a lot of those other things. Now, if the dog stops for more than like half a second to sniff something and actively stops following you, you'd probably give a correction for that, or you would, hey, come on, we got to keep going, right?
Yeah.
But you don't necessarily need to micromanage it quite as much because they're being attentive to you, right? Even though they're back there and maybe stopping to sniff a couple of different things, they're actively paying attention enough where it's not a problem. Mm-hmm. Other types of dogs, more pushy dogs, more dominant dogs, those are the ones that tend to stay a lot tighter with you in that heel position. They push the boundary a little bit more. They try to forage a little bit more. And I really think a lot of that has to do with their competing to get ahead a little bit.
Right.
Right? And those are the ones that need more management and more micromanagement. I mean, even with Honeycomb, for the first fucking year that you started bringing her to the shop, you hardly put an e-collar on her. And it was never a problem, right?
Right.
Honestly, aside from like one or two little instances where she was like, I want to go check this out or whatever, it never really turned into a problem because you had that type of relationship with her. Similar to, like, we're talking about this guy at the bar, or we're talking to the guy that does the off-leash bike riding, where you know how to live with a dog, and you know how to discipline a dog, and you know the relationship you have with her. So it's like, I don't need to micromanage you. I don't need these tools and stuff.
Right.
I think it's partly the relationship and partly the dog.
100%.
Absolutely.
You know?
Totally.
And like you bringing that up to me actually like just got in my head a little bit. Like, should I have communicated like, oh, I'm cool with that kind of thing, or like, should I have been harder on that criteria with her, you know? And I think that that's all, like, and that's where I think that owners should really be aware of just knowing the dog that they have, you know? I think that even it took a lot of soul searching after you told me that to decide what I should have done differently, you know? And I think that's what's kind of cool about being trainers is how we can kind of let our dogs live naturally and teach our clients to let their dogs live naturally, but work through those things first to get to that point, but also making sure we're advocating for them too.
I would agree with that. You know, I mean, somebody told me one time, if you're training your clients' dogs the same way you would train your dogs, you're doing something wrong. And if you're training your dogs the way you train your clients' dogs, you're doing something wrong. Because I think what they're getting at that is, I think it was Tyler that told me, I think what they're getting at with that is that we should always be pushing our standards as a trainer to a higher level of how do I live a better relationship with our dogs? How do I train them in a more efficient way? How do I really make sure I'm dotting all the I's and crossing the T's? How do I make sure that my dogs are holding the standard of the training that I want to be holding? And I've taken that more to less the actual obedience training that I'm doing with my dog and more the lifestyle that I'm living with my dog, which is what we talked about the last 2 episodes on this. Is, you know, my goal with my dogs has always been, how do I micromanage them as little as possible and let them live as organic of a life as possible? You know, more examples. I've been working up here a lot since we just got this table and all that stuff the last couple of days here. And, you know, my office is up here, my desk is up here and stuff. And one big thing that I wanted in my head is I wanted this to be the space that the dogs weren't really in. You know, there's a lot of just random shit up here that I didn't want them fucking around with. So I kind of set that boundary of, you guys don't come up here, right? Now, did I need to do that by doing a 4-hour-long bed stay while I was up here working? No, I just set the boundary of, you don't come up the steps. And what happened was, you know, again, using Vinny as an example, because he's always the tough one with this kind of stuff. Yesterday, I was up here for like 3 hours, and I came downstairs, and he's laying in the bedroom, you know, on the bed with Vinny, Vera, or with Vera and Deli, right? Just kind of chilling over there. And that's something he would never like organically just do on his own. But because he realized he couldn't come up here and there was nothing he was going to get, he found other ways and time to entertain himself. Now, I'm sure for the first hour of me being up here, he was probably sitting at the bottom of the stairs, just like, what are you doing up there? What's going on? Hey, what are you doing? You know? But eventually he got bored and he figured something else out. So by creating these associations and creating these different patterns for our dogs, we could start to solve a lot of the problems we have about our dogs being annoying and just being in our space all the time, just by setting the rules, the boundaries, and the limitations.
Yeah.
right? Like, we could solve a lot of those problems just by establishing those things. And that's why furniture access, right? That's something we tell some clients that have serious dogs to eliminate, right? Don't let your dog on the furniture anymore. Correct them if they go up there, because it creates a boundary when there's no boundaries, right? When I created a boundary of going up the stairs, that was a rule and a boundary that was enforceable, that I could get my dog focused in on when there was no expectation of things. Creating furniture access rules is a boundary you can create when you're not doing all the training, because training, in the end of the day, is only 10% of your day, 5% of your day. And you got to be able to create those boundaries, those rules, and those limitations elsewhere as well to keep them balanced throughout the entire day. So it's not like training mode just gets turned off after your training session.
Train as you live. I tell my clients that all the time.
Train as you live. Living is training. Training is living. All right, guys. We hit 2 hours. Let's wrap this up. Anything to say?
Thank you for having us again.
Yeah. Thank you. It's bedtime.
Can't wait to dissect more Cesar stuff.
Can't wait to keep talking about it.
Oh, yeah.
Well, we had, let's see, where are we at? Exactly.
We had a lot to say today.
A lot to say. 2 hours and 1 minute.
Oh, nice.
Very exciting.
We hit
Exactly. We hit the 2 hour mark.
Very nice.
With a 20-minute emotional speech by me, into Cesar's book, into drinking a couple beers, slurring through a couple words, getting into some training stuff. It's a good time. If you want to learn more, head to @Davidthedogtrainer, @Christa's Canines. Is it still Christa's Canines?
Yeah.
I love that so much.
I don't know what to name it.
Had Emily Lynn something.
Nickel.
Emily Lynn Nickel. And @Miracle Canine Training. Come do dog training with us at miraclecaninetraining.com. Until that, we'll see you guys next time.